All right, welcome everybody. How y'all doing? Welcome to A2IM's new Indiescussion series, where we're going to be chatting with experts from all across our member base around subjects that are heavily impacting the independent sector. As everyone is aware, the majority of battles we're currently facing are all due to the unprecedented changes that COVID-19 has brought along with it over the past few months. So today we'll be speaking with, one of our associate members, Feature FM, around the best ways to effectively engage with fans online during a crisis. Feature FM is a marketing and advertising platform built exclusively for the music industry, with many of their products specifically tailored to meet the needs of independent artists and labels. If you work in the industry, there is no doubt that you've come across their biggest public-facing product on a nearly daily basis, Smart Links. A link that lets artists share their music with fans on multiple platforms, all in the form of one landing page. That's just one of the many services that they offer out, and I'll let them speak further to that in just a second. I could go on for hours about their services because, as many of you tuning in know, I actually used to work there for just under 4 years. So I'm very excited today to introduce my good friend and former colleague, Mikey Sherman, on top, Director of Business Development, who will be leading the conversation, and then Corey Crossfield, their Director of Client Services. Also important to note that Mikey is actually a member of A2IM on both the associate side and the label side as well. He's the co-founder of 2220, which is a small Brooklyn-based operation that puts out some truly incredible music from a very unique and diverse roster with an emphasis on breaking traditional boundaries that often circulate our industry. So he'll also be providing a label perspective for us today when we chat. So let's get started. How you guys doing, first and foremost?
Good. Thanks for that introduction.
Yeah. It comes out of me naturally at this point. But let's jump right into it. So, you guys are the digital marketing experts. How have you seen the standard advice and best practices that you traditionally give out to your clients shift because of the current landscape we're in? What tweaks and adjustments should artists and labels be making to their normal online strategy right now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'll take a stab at it, and then Corey, maybe you want to jump in. So I'm Director of Business Development at Feature FM. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is working with clients that are in a prospective client status, right? Whether they're a label, a management company, an agency, or a distributor, they're thinking about how to kind of enhance their marketing and advertising for their partners. And so a lot of the conversations I've been having these days are effectively crowdsourcing how a lot of different parts of our business are shifting their marketing, right? So all I am is just a sponge. I'm just kind of like pulling it in from our partners and trying to integrate it into our products. And we're seeing a lot of the kind of trends obviously move online because that's where everyone's spending their time. But what we're seeing a lot of people gravitate towards are a deeper desire to better understand where their traffic is coming from and where it's going to. So trying to break down some of the barriers that you might have in traditional online media. So trying to better understand who and how fans are engaging on Instagram or TikTok or Spotify. And so using tools and learning about what's available out there to try and better understand what that engagement looks like. We're seeing a lot of that happening with people having some extra time to spend investigating.
Cool.
Yeah, and to add on that, I think another thing that I've been seeing in particular is sort of people diversifying their content strategy. So it's less of like, hey, go buy a tour date or stream my song, and really like artists and talent honing in on a one-to-one strategy with whether it's doing Instagram lives or just answering questions from fans directly on Twitter. It's really about them engaging and trying to come up with new ways other than just, static copy that they're putting up on their socials. They're really actually getting very interesting results, and we're seeing a lot of people do a lot of creative things.
Cool. Anything specific that, an artist or a label should really be knowledgeable on to kind of shift around right now that you guys have noticed?
I mean, I've seen a lot of artists that maybe are a little bit older or haven't had the time create TikTok accounts. I've seen a lot of just even not artists, just people in the industry that really haven't had the time to invest in TikTok actually take the time to better understand it. So it's been cool to kind of watch that normalize, I'd say, amongst the old guard and the new guard of the industry. And we're seeing a lot of people obviously gravitate towards Bandcamp because of waiving commission. So anything that can be done, I think, with a gregarious angle to kind of support the independent community, we're actually watching our labels at Feature FM, our partners, mostly the independents, support other independents that are doing the right things for the community. So yeah, direct to fan contributions. Obviously, we're seeing Spotify roll that out, SoundCloud roll that out, and Bandcamp waive their commissions. So I think people are trying to figure out how they can more effectively market those platforms to their fans, because those platforms perhaps have more value add at the end of the day because they do have these tipping tools.
Sure, sure. And speaking of platforms, you know, what do you guys feel are some of the most important platforms to focus on right now? You know, where are we going to find the highest probability of effective engagement?
I think for right now, I'm seeing across a lot of the artists that we work with and a lot of our label partners, I'm seeing a lot of engagement on Instagram. Going back to Instagram Live, I've seen so many artists pick that up as like a tool. Even ones that you wouldn't associate like Instagram being with, like more of the older leaning artists, and they're doing really interesting things. I think TikTok is, as Mikey mentioned, one that a lot of people are adapting to very quickly, because there's just so much content about all the negative stuff going on right now that they're sort of looking for like a positive influence in their lives. And TikTok always has like the 2-hour hole that you go down when you find content that you like. I think also a lot of people that I've seen are steering away from Facebook, going more towards like YouTube for longer form content, like concerts or live streams from artists. And then Instagram Live or TikTok for a variation on that type of content. So Instagram Live, you have artists like Miley Cyrus that are doing like talk shows daily, where she's bringing on people that she's interested in or TV shows that she likes and talking to them. You see also other artists that will just go on, and like Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie, who's been doing a lot of covers on Instagram Live, not of Death Cab songs, of songs that he just likes or sources from fans. So things like that, where it's like a really interesting example of engagement with fans. I'm seeing a lot of, because artists are starting to realize that with COVID, everybody's stuck inside of their house watching Netflix. And once you get through all the top 10 new shows, you still have like 5 days left in the week. So you gotta somehow fill up that content and diversify what you're doing. So everybody's trying out new and exciting things, but those are the 3 platforms that I've seen that have sort of risen to the top in the crisis that we're in right now.
Yeah, and I'd say like as a, sorry, Alyssa. Yeah, I'd just say as a sub-bullet, something that's in there as well that I think people are still trying to figure out, myself included, is Twitch, right? Twitch is going live with a lot of live streams these days, but and while they're building a great music team, it seems that the platform itself is not native to music just yet. So there's an interesting retrofitting that's happening, and Twitch has a massive user base, but historically not music-centric. So kind of curious to see how that plays out over the next couple of weeks, because I am kind of bullish on live streaming. Not to say I'm a huge fan when the sound quality is not great, but I think inevitably, and we see this with the National Independent Venue Association, inevitably as these venues come back online, the rooms will still need to be socially distanced, and there will be a lot of underplay. So there's going to be a lot of really big artists playing small rooms. So live streaming, as far as I think we suspect, isn't going anywhere. It's just a matter of how you can effectively market it as a ticket or an engagement. Like, it's hard to understand what a live stream actually is. So when we think about engagement, I think that's a really big question mark still.
Yeah, and it's very unique engagements that we're getting right now as well, right? Because with all of these live streams being done just directly from your living room or your bedroom, anything, it's kind of like this this very humanizing effect that we're seeing, right? You know, even if you're doing like a Skype call with a client or something, and all of a sudden their kid runs in or their dog runs in, you see the artwork that they have behind them. It gives us like a little bit more of a different connection and a different perspective than you would get if you're meeting somebody just outside of their traditional space, I've found.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it allows people that wouldn't otherwise be in the same space to collaborate because they're in their space, right? So when you see, you know, like Cardi B and Bernie Sanders on Instagram Live, maybe they'd be at a rally together, maybe, but the likelihood of that happening is slim. And so you can leverage these platforms as a digital space, almost as a venue, and bring people into that venue that are in different parts of the world. So I think we're just starting to see what we're capable of. And it's got a long way to go, but I'm really curious to understand how labels and distributors think about live streaming in general as a digital trend. But of course, I think Sherry Hu said it really nicely. There's a big underbelly to the commercialization of live streaming. So that also has a lot of question marks that we'll have to answer.
Yeah. So going back to when we were saying how we're talking about effective engagement, if you will, how do you guys really define that? You know, what types of metrics and benchmarks should we be looking at to determine if an activation was successful or not? You know, you could have thousands of streams or views on a post or a live stream, but how many of those people actually clicked onto your DSP page and streamed your music after? How many people actually bought merch from you? You know, how can we really look to measure those after effects of doing those live streams?
So it's anecdotal. Corey might have something a little bit more like quantifiable. What I always say, and other people say it too, is that if you have, you know, 1,000 fans that pay you $100, you have a pretty good business. Streaming has put us into a world where you get 4/10 of a penny when someone streams a song. So to understand who that individual is and trying to get that individual to commit more money to you than 4/10 of a penny, even if it's just small, just a small economy of scale, is meaningful, right? Because if you're getting them to buy a ticket or a piece of merch or a physical or hard good, you're getting them to engage with you, and perhaps over time they'll do more of that. And so careers become sustainable, I think, on actual fans, not anonymized 4/10 of a penny streams. So when I think about engagement, I think about, can you actually track what that person did back to the individual? And if you can connect the two, to me, that's the strongest level of engagement. The music industry struggles to do that because when you send people to Spotify or other services, the services don't always tell you what's happening. But e-commerce does that really well. Ticketing does that really well. I'm hopeful that streaming will too. And once we have kind of I think a gold standard for attribution data or conversion, so being able to track where someone comes from and where they go to and what action they take, that's the kind of holy grail of engagement. But I guess to answer your question, the short answer is engagement is knowing who did what. And to me, knowing the individual, first name, last name, age, demographic, email address, and being able to cultivate that relationship over time, that's really the strongest engagement. That's what we strive for, I think.
So you guys go after the super fan, essentially.
We try and help our partners, like, I guess, delineate amongst their fan base between the people they know and the people that they can make inferences about. So you can know an individual like myself, first name, last name, email address, or you can make inferences about people like me, someone in New York that listens to guitar rock, that goes to, you know, elsewhere in the Poisson Rouge, and then start making lookalike audiences, because there are inevitably other people out there like you that share interests. So there's differences between who you can actually figure out to be a super fan, and then the people that you think might have an affinity for your music, trying to sift through the ones that aren't as interested in hopes of getting to the ones that are.
Cool. And what are some of the tools that Feature FM provides to help people track all of this?
We have a wide variety of tools, but to back up for a sec, for engagement, there's different parameters that you should always make sure that you have as a benchmark. So for streaming, yes, vanity metrics like views and plays and things like that are very important outside facing, but the ones that you can really track and the ones that you can really take is like beyond what Mikey is saying, where you're identifying like 1,000 fans, is people saving the track to their libraries or their playlists. On socials, it's people not only liking or retweeting or resharing your content, but also, you know, engaging with the content, sharing it with their friends, retweeting it, going to your live streams, being able to do things like on Instagram, like identify your top 50 fans. That's like a very important way of reaching everybody. So if you're using that as a benchmark for the tools that we have in particular, there's, you know, you can track your links, you can identify traffic sources. So at the start of a campaign, if you're going to release some music during COVID, and a lot of folks are, and you want to really nail down where all of your fans are at, you're able to create organic channel links where you can track where your traffic's coming from across the web or across all of the different socials that you have for your artists or your label. More important on top of that, being able to track your fans going to Spotify or Apple or Pandora or YouTube and really being able to see where you're driving traffic to from your socials. So I always like to say that your socials are a distribution outlet, and where your music is hosted or where your content is hosted, where you're driving people to is where you need to know where your fans are going. So if you post a link up on Facebook, where are they going? Where do 80% of your fans go? Do they go to Spotify? Do they go to Apple? Because that kind of data that you're collecting is going to inform your ad strategy or your email lists, even down to the country. Being able to see that you have 800 people coming from Denmark is a very important tool to use to be able to then retarget them or reach them. So engagement, I think, is important on all levels, and setting proper benchmarks for how you even distribute content is super important these days, especially in COVID, because you don't have the benefit of going to a live show and getting ticket purchase or information or anything like that. So you're really just sort of at the mercy of the social networks.
Yeah, sure. How are you guys defining these benchmarks? I know you work with artists who are just up and coming, who are still bedroom producers, and then you work with some of the largest independent labels, in the world. How do you guys help them to distinguish what one person should be monitoring versus another artist?
I think it's an easy and complicated answer. So I always like to say that your strategy starts with the type of release that you're doing and the genre. Whether you're a bedroom producer or you're a stadium act, really how you identify your genre is really going to inform your strategy worldwide. And also on socials, because the average demo of a rock fan is not going to be the same demo as a 18-year-old bedroom producer from Sweden that's putting up songs on SoundCloud. So for us, setting those benchmarks is really at first working with our partners to identify what the goal is of the campaign. Are they just trying to release a single and get playlisting? Are they trying to identify, as Mikey mentioned, their top 1,000 fans, and then being able to retarget them through an EP or release cycle with instant grats rolled in there? I think that it's really important as a label, and especially as an independent label these days, to have those benchmarks when you're looking at things like, well, what are we trying to accomplish with this release? Like, are we trying to accomplish 100,000 streams in the first week? Are we trying to accomplish getting 50,000 people to save it to their library? And then how we work with our partners is, okay, well, you should take advantage of pre-save tools that we have. Start it 30 days in advance before the first single comes out or before the release comes out. Making sure that you have your pixels installed. Being able to track where people are going. Identifying your audiences on your Facebook Business Manager. Really, it's sort of up to the label, but I think Mikey can probably speak more to a label perspective. I'm coming from the digital strategy side of things.
Yeah, shift to Mikey label.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I'm wearing a label hat and I'm looking at, I guess, metrics that we can use to determine whether or not we're being effective, it's interesting. I think, like Corey said, it's a easy and difficult question because they're all somewhat related in some respects. I think every piece of data that we look at as a label begs a question, and with every answer, it's another question. And so it's really a matter, and I hate the phrase, but peeling the onion and really trying to uncover, unveil who your fans are. Because once you kind of understand that core grouping of fans, like Corey was saying, you can retarget them. So as a label, we use similar kind of logic to what Feature FM is effectively bringing to market, which is to figure out who your core audience is and then start making inferences about them, right? Use services out there like a Facebook Business Manager or Google's advertising platform or other trade desks to reach fans that look and act and behave like people already like your music. And so for us, when we look at a metric, we want to know that our sample size, if we're using scientific terminology, is your sample size is smart enough that you can make inferences about them, that those inferences are also pretty accurate. And so we like to just, like Corey said, have about a good understanding of about 1,000 fans that have engaged with content. So we can start slicing and dicing what services they like, where they're coming from, what they're doing, how they're sharing. And once we start building a profile, you can start kind of making your own assumptions, but also using services that can help you make some of those assumptions and use algorithms in your favor. So a good line of sight into about 1,000 fans can really put you in good standing to figure out how to reach millions that look like them.
Cool, thank you. So in order to get this effective engagement, what types of content have you seen that's really produced the most successful results so far? Obviously, we've made an extremely sharp pivot into live stream territory right now. And all of a sudden, we're kind of facing this grossly oversaturated environment with, a new online festival popping up here, another intimate live stream performance from someone's living room there. How can you make your live stream stand out in such a crowded marketplace right now?
I think, yeah, I mean, just a shameless plug. I work with a company called Dice as well, do some consulting there. And Dice launched something called Dice TV, which is effectively solving this problem, which is helping folks that are moving from live to live stream to market and monetize their events. So when you see Room Service Festival coming up that's being hosted from the guy from Fire Festival, you know, how does that stand out versus the Warner Music Streaming Festival when the artists look the same? Well, you have to create incentives. You have to create interesting fan experiences, engaging content. I think folks that have done that really well are a company called Open Pit, the ones that do shows within Minecraft. That's just unique to begin with. And even if you're not a Minecraft user or curious, when is a better time to explore something new than under a quarantine? So I think folks are taking a lot of advantage of people's curiosity. And so if you can create curiosity through these experiences, I think that's a really interesting way to stand out. So almost, you know, you got to be there. And whatever that kind of digital equivalent is I think those events that are winning right now.
So stirring up that sense of FOMO, if you will.
As much as you, I guess as much as you can from your couch.
And just to touch on that, on the flip side of it, I always like to provide another view. Going back to Ben Gibbard, he's been doing all of these cover songs on Instagram Live with fans and connecting. But the really fun part is that he's actually been releasing those as like Death Cab releases. So it's really interesting to be able to see him like perform them live and then also be able to like listen to it on Spotify, you know, a week later, which I don't know if about anybody else here, but like every time I go to a show, I always put together the band's playlist that I want to listen to. And then I listen to it after I go to the show just to like relive my youth, which is sad, but also something that I do. So it's really interesting that he's creating content in COVID, but also releasing it. So it's a really fun, tangible experience where you can actually see like, okay, this is how much engagement I've been getting before the live streams I've been doing on Instagram. And this is what it's like afterwards. Like, what is the correlation between, you know, performing these on IG Live and then archiving the content and releasing it on Spotify? So you're not only creating live content in the live streaming context, but you're also, it's also sort of somewhat evergreen because you're putting it out as a release. And we know that there's going to be some type of artist that's going to be super unknown that's going to put out the Corona sessions, and we're all just going to have to deal with listening to it.
I've already seen a few of those. Cool. Thank you, guys.
At the home board or whatever that song is these days. Yeah, we already have one.
Yeah, and I've heard about 10 different remixes of Cardi B, Coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, there might be something to that though, right? Because if you're not putting out new content, so a lot of projects, I guess, that haven't been announced have been paused to some degree. And people don't necessarily know when they're going to come back online because maybe you're not touring or maybe the artist hasn't taken to socials in the same way. So I think what we're seeing is a lot of folks get really creative with derivatives, like exploiting derivative masters. So remixes, acoustic versions, mashups, collaborations. I think we're just getting started, right? So when a project used to have a different kind of cycle or shelf life, that's going to be inevitably extended because it has to bridge us to whenever, I guess, post-corona happens and people are releasing content regularly. That's not to say people aren't releasing music now, but there are certainly some folks who've hit pause on projects and they need to get creative with what they're putting out in the meantime. So I am curious to see how many remixes and acoustic albums and extended versions and box sets we see through this.
Yeah. And I think it's very important to acknowledge the time that we're in as well, instead of kind of just putting it to the side and pushing your work to the side. And it has been very interesting to see what artists have come up with so far. Literally just right before I jumped on this call, I was sent some merch I was sent a link to merch from Run the Jewels, and they have a t-shirt with the Run the Jewels hands, and it's talking all about how you hand wash. And It's just really interesting to see them embrace and to see how long that goes on for.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, one of the things that most of us have probably read about is like, you know, they're the haves and the have-nots with the celebrities where folks are jumping on Twitter and saying, hey, don't forget to give your money to the Red Cross. But then inevitably you get a troll that investigates the person and sees that they haven't donated a dime to charity. So there's a lot of, I think, curtains being lifted right now. And so I think artists are in a really powerful position, right? Like sports stars or movie like actors and the rest, they have platforms. Artists do too, but only when you get to a certain level. But I think this is kind of this equalizing happening. So artists do have a platform now, I think, to be extremely, I guess, unionized, for lack of a better word, right? Because they need all the help they can get. So I think artists of all levels are trying to find a common interest and a way to present themselves through a platform that makes sense.
So going back to the artist, should an artist right now be more focused on maintaining the current fan base that they have, or should they still be factoring social growth into their plans?
They should always be factoring social growth. COVID should not affect that. If anything, COVID should enlighten artists to see that digital is sort of where it's trending to, more so than in the past. And I think that there are so many ways now for you to be able to stay relevant with fans that you already have and engage them, but also attract new ones. Like it's sort of the Wild West right now, with respectable social distancing. And I think that artists should really take it upon themselves to like empower fans and show fans that like, A, they're not alone, which I think is really important to establish in any artist to fan relationship during these kinds of times. And also really getting creative with your content strategy. Like, it doesn't have to be you just put up something on Spotify or you go live on Twitch. Like, identify your top 50 fans and do like a close friends chat on Instagram. Do a playlist just for fans that are following you and you can DM them like on Instagram or Twitter. Go live on YouTube and just message that out like right before you go on, so it feels like an intimate session. I think that there's so many new things that you could do. Don't just go and create a TikTok and just start making TikTok videos, because if that's not authentic to your brand or how you communicate with your fans, then it's going to seem fake, and nobody wants to see an 80-year-old guitarist that just discovered TikTok make a bunch of cover videos of a Cardi B track. But I think that there's a lot that you can do. Like UGC right now would be such a great thing for artists to encourage fans to do that don't really require a lot of work. That could exploit your catalog that you have. That could help push streams that you have on streaming services. I think that there's just so many things. I have personally been wanting to suggest that an artist do an Alexa skill and try and do something interesting there with a release. Amazon Music, in case nobody's ever heard of Amazon. That was a joke. But yeah, I think that there's so many different things that you can do right now that, like, especially with voice or live streaming, as Mikey's mentioned a few times from the label side, that really you can't rest on your laurels. Like, you should really be putting more investment into that content strategy.
And I think that some folks that are doing it really well, Charlie XCX has really engaged her fan base in a really interesting way, like Zoom meetings about cover art and releasing samples of songs and better understanding if folks like it or not, and crowdsourcing the reaction. Like, to a degree, we were already moving in that direction, but I think now that people are open to it, you're going to see some real winners in that space. So I am curious to see what the kind of expectations become of artists from fans in this more, I guess, collaborative and open and honest and transparent creative process.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to touch a little bit more on your platform specifically. So you guys have a pretty heavy data-driven product on the back end, right? A lot of services that you offer out help to collect some incredibly valuable data from fans, both first and third party. What should we be paying attention to most right now?
Yeah, that's a really, Alyssa knows that I love this question. That's a really tough question.
We did a panel on it together last year.
That's right. If there was something called second party data, I'd probably say that, right? Because it's really a combination of being really bullish and focused on first party data when you can get it, which is not always, and third party data, which you can always get. So if you're not, you should, right? So I guess where your focus could be is third party data, because it's a very low barrier to entry. Where your focus should be perhaps is first party data, because it's going to be more valuable in the long term. And just to delineate between the two, and Corey should definitely correct me because I'll need some, which is to say that first party data is going to allow for you to understand your fans on a first party basis. So first name, last name, email address, age, location, identifiable information about that person. And it's usually private, right? So this is what we're always talking about when it comes to GDPR. That's private information. That's first party information. Then there's third party information, which is what you can pixel folks to get. So Corey should probably speak on this one a little bit more, but it's going to really allow you to understand who your audiences are, but it's going to be anonymized. And I'll hand it to Corey with that.
Great, leave off at the hard part. Okay, so for us, a big thing that I like to advocate, because I have a background working on digital strategy on the artist management side before coming to work at Gibbard. So for me, pixeling is the most important part of a strategy campaign. I think that a lot of people don't necessarily understand what it does or what it is. And when you say pixel and they're like, yeah, have you put that into a link? They're like, yeah, because they just don't understand what it is. But it's actually being able to, as Mikey said, identify third-party data from like streaming services. So like one thing that I always like to advocate is doing a pre-save with a pixel in, because you're able to then use that information on the back end of Facebook Business Manager, where it's collecting all of this data from like people pre-saving on Spotify or pre-saving on Apple Music or, you know, pre-saving on Deezer. And you're able to then target those users based off of those actions that users are committing inside of a browser. So what that means is that if you have a release coming out in 30 days and you already had a pre-save set up, you can then build a custom audience on Facebook Business Manager, which is sort of how you identify the folks that you want to reach when you're creating an ad. And then be able to reach people that have actually had a one-to-one engagement with your music product, such as a pre-save, right? So for me, that is a much more valuable audience than just putting up like an Instagram ad or a Facebook ad or a TrueView ad on YouTube and running a 15-second pre-roll, because you're targeting people that have already been identified as fans through these third parties. Like, don't get me started on Spotify or Apple Music taking data away from us and not being able to use it, because that's a whole other webinar. But for us, we like to take that information and put it in the hands of artists or labels and then have them be able to actually use it. So that's sort of in a nutshell, in a very idealistic look at the music industry and how pixels work.
Yeah. Have you seen the best practices for pre-saves adjust at all? I know traditionally it would be around like a few weeks out that you would do the pre-save, and obviously given everything that's going on right now, we're in like a 24-hour news cycle. We've got all those live streams, so much just kind of congestion in the social media space right now. Has anything changed around that?
For me, I still think that it's useless to do a pre-save unless it's 30 days out, just because, I mean, these times have sort of shortened the release cycle for a lot of people because they're putting up content that they just record on an IG live, right? Or on a YouTube live or Twitch and release it. But the thing is that just because the attention span of our audience has somewhat become corrupted with all of these different things being thrown at them on every platform that they consume, you really can't take away from like a proper, well thought out strategy. So for pre-save, I still like to advocate for like best practices being like 30 days, but I do realize that with these current times, there are limitations. So I say like 2 weeks now. Like that's the change that I've seen, where it's still valuable, and you can still market it and you can still collect data, but it's a shorter amount of time. I think that, you know, keeping fans waiting now is not something that artists feel comfortable doing anymore in their teams. So they're advocating for a shorter release cycle, like a 2 week, because they can still put everything out on the DSPs and have everything be set up correctly. So those are like the best practices that I've seen as changes. I also have seen a lot of like artists becoming more platform agnostic, less just driving folks to Spotify, less just driving folks to Apple Music, and really making it like a 360 approach with all of the DSPs.
Cool. Okay, last question that I just wanted to go over with you guys. So I know you offer out a whole suite of tools for digital marketers. What are, I guess, you know, the most essential things to have in the digital marketer toolbox, if you will, to make sure that we are, you know, effectively capitalizing on everything that we just went through over the past 40 minutes?
Do we have an hour? I'm just kidding. I think the most important thing is I mean, if it's, I guess it would be considered part of a toolbox, but a solid strategy outline and with actionable deliverables and actionable steps, I think is the most important thing. For tools like a stack to suggest, I mean, obviously the platform that we work for, I would suggest like link shorteners if you have those, activity tracking. So being able to track everything, making sure that your pixels are set up correctly. That's another one, you know, making sure that you have a Google Analytics account, that you know what to do with it. And being able to track that on a basic level. Facebook Business Manager, if you don't have that set up, you should. If you need help, you know, reach out to the folks that you can and have them assist you with that. For streaming or anything like that, making sure that you have a buffer of at least 2 weeks set up for any releases that you have coming out. Making sure that the content that you're putting out is adjusted correctly for the mobile first fans that you will be surfacing content to, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen older artists put out videos, even now in these times, that are built for like a desktop size screen and not mobile. I think also just a part of your toolkit being, you know, just sort of common sense and really like a more realistic perspective of the world that we're in. You have to remember that everybody's on their phones right now. We're all locked in our houses. This is a common shared trauma that we're all going through. And I think being more open and honest with fans and also like trying to start some type of dialogue is a great way to approach content creation right now.
Yeah,
Awesome.
That's all extremely well said. I think mine is more like even anecdotal. I think one of the things that you should have in your toolbox at this time is just curiosity, right? Like, what could you be doing better? There are unlimited resources out there around this, and they're becoming actually staggering by the day, whether they're for artists or independent labels or people that are trying to go from 0 to 1 million streams. Obviously, some of it's vaporware, but there are a lot of playbooks and best practices out there that are just kind of table stakes for the folks that really want to skill up on digital marketing. So I think one of the most important things you should have in your toolbox is curiosity. Figure out something you don't know, Google it, and I guarantee you will find out what experts are available to you in the space that can walk you through it effectively for free. So whether it's, you know, Facebook's classes to get set up on Business Manager or becoming YouTube certified, these are all things that I think are not mandatory by any means. But I think just like, you know, any manager could benefit from being a lawyer, but has to go to law school, anyone can benefit from being a digital marketer, and you don't have to go to grad school. We have the time now. So I think the curiosity is really what's going to substantiate any technology that you end up purchasing or using long term. Cool.
So does Feature FM have anything coming down the pipeline this year that we should anticipate?
Yeah, there's definitely some cool stuff, I guess, on the horizon. We'll be making some announcements pretty soon, relating back to, I guess, what I was saying before around sending traffic to a service and understanding what people do once they get there. So we'll be making some announcements of stores and partners that we have in that space. That's exciting. Some more stuff is going to be rolling out around their pre-saves. Some more bells and whistles for the, you know, the expert digital marketers that have releases that are coming out in different time zones and different territories. Of course, we want our pre-saves to be able to support those different time zones and territories, switching over when that release comes out. So we'll have that coming soon. And there's some other stuff I'm not sure I'm able to share at the moment. Corey, what did I miss?
The things that we can't share.
I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything.
No.
Okay. Keep an eye on the Feature FM socials. Corey's been doing incredible webinars too. So if anyone has any curiosity, actually a great place to start is with Corey and your webinars. So yeah, I think you'll be able to see a lot of these launches coming in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, and that leads me to my next question. If anybody wants to get in touch with Feature FM, learn a little bit more about the company, chat with one of you guys, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm reachable at Michael S, MICHAELS at feature.fm. And you can email me anytime. I'll get back to you.
Oh, I have to enter mine. Corey, COREYC at feature.fm.
Okay, great.
And if it's easier to remember, you can always just email community@feature.fm.
Yeah.
That's probably the easiest.
That's right.
Guys, this was exceptionally insightful, and I really appreciate both of you taking time out to join us today. Everybody who is listening, again, we are A2IM. If anybody has any questions on membership or getting involved, learning a little bit more about the organization, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm just Alyssa at a2im.org, or you can also reach us at community at, oh, you guys are community. We are membership at a2im.org or info@a2im.org. Somebody will get back to you right away. Guys, you are awesome. Thanks so much. And we will see everybody next week. We've got 2 panels that we'll be running, actually, one on Tuesday and one on Thursday. We'll be messaging out about that at the top of the week. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Bye.
Okay.